Welcome to the Enriched Wealth Podcast. Today we have Lachlan Edwards from OFRM Lawyers, Director and Commercial Lawyer, joining us today. And I'm very excited to have Lachlan in the studio. Lachlan, thanks for coming in and joining us.
Thank you, Kris.
Now, I'd love to get you to talk a little bit about who you are, your current job role, and then I'd love to roll back the clock and go, how did you get to where you are? What's the journey? And we've talked a little bit beforehand, and I love the journey, and it's
Yes.
a bit of a different way in, and I think most people just think you just go this way and do that, but you've done a few different things. So really excited to dig into that. But tell us a little bit about commercial lawyer. What does that mean? A little bit later on, we're going to dig into what that looks like day to day, how you help clients, but just love a bit of a starting point around that for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Kris. So who am I? Well, I'm a commercial lawyer. What does that mean? So,
how long have we got?
Well, why don't I start with my day? So this morning I come in and I could do anything from writing up a terms and conditions for a business.
Yep.
Then I get a phone call and someone's like, hey, we've got this employee and we've got a problem with them. I need your help. So reprioritising to help them in the moment. Rightio, let's send me some information and then I'll come back to you at 2:00.
Yes.
Yep. Then I might have my team meeting, we delegate out our tasks, and then I'm into some chunky work, which might be drawing up your business owner's agreement.
Oh.
Then I get another interruption, and it's an urgent call, and it's like, hey, I want to break up with my business owners. We don't have an agreement on how this works, so what do I do? So I'm into that, maybe 15, 20 minutes, arrange a more detailed time to go through it. Then I'm thinking, okay, what else have I got to do? I've got to write this lease for this new commercial property. I've got to write up a contract for a commercial property sale.
Yep.
I've got to touch base with my client who's selling their business, see where they're up to with the steps between signing their contract and getting to settlement. Then I've got some governance work I've got to do in some other roles I've got, which are through my commercial lawyer work. And they might be working with boards on policies and procedures, remuneration structures, committees, and things like that. Then I get another interruption, and I haven't even made it to lunch, right? So you can see where it's going. So the joy of my job is how dynamic it is and how I get to work with people in my community like you. And I suppose like any other job, you do what you do well, but ultimately it's about helping people.
Yes.
Yeah, and helping their businesses.
I love that, because I think, not for everyone, but I think there'd be some people out there that think lawyers go to court, lawyers sit and write nasty letters and these kind of things.
I do that too.
Yeah. But there's a whole varied range of things, and I think we'll dig into that. But I'd love to hear a bit about your story. How did you get to where you are now? What's the journey look like? Where did it all start? When was that first time that you're like, I think I want to be a lawyer?
Right. Good question. Let's go right back to the start. So,
go for it.
1985, born in Deniliquin Hospital.
Yes. Yep. Do they still have a hospital?
Yeah, there's a hospital. My cousin works there. So,
yeah, nice.
Yeah, as a nurse. So,
yeah.
So born the son of a TAFE teacher. My mum's a TAFE teacher. Big inspiration. Love you, Mum. Big inspiration on on my career. And the son of a plumber, self-employed plumber, who worked for the council and then ran his own show.
Yeah, excellent.
So that's where I started.
So didn't want plumbing wasn't a call for you?
My brother and my cousin, they went down that path,
nice.
but not me.
Yep.
Yeah. So Deniliquin Public High School I went to.
Yep.
So 500 people. Made the newspaper when I got my... it was called an enter score back in the day, so you know the score you get at the end.
I had an enter score too. Yeah. It's something completely different now.
Yeah. So... and so went away and studied at La Trobe in Bandura.
Yep.
But probably the moment when I thought, do I want to be a lawyer?
So did you go and study law?
No.
So
no.
What did you go and study?
Well, I remember having this conversation with my mum, who was a TAFE teacher, head teacher, and she brought in these books. And she's like, here's some certificates you can do at TAFE around creative things like multimedia and marketing and so forth. And I'm like, no, Mum, I'm going to Melbourne. Didn't matter what I was doing, I was going to Melbourne, right? Because, you know, the rebel in you just wants to go and experience something else, right?
Yeah, forge your own path.
So I did a Bachelor of Media Studies, major journalism. So that was journalism back in the day when it was paper. You know, it was print.
Everyone still brought a paper. Which just doesn't happen these days.
Yeah.
And so what was your what led you to journalism? Was there a real desire to want to write? Was there a desire to want to tell the truth? Was there a desire to, which I think there might be people thinking about what media looks like these days, and it looks a little bit different to that. But what was sort of that calling for you towards that role?
It was probably the middle ground of the truth and telling the story.
Yep.
Yeah. So whether it was news or whether it was longer interest investigative things, but yeah, that's probably why. And I don't know, thinking back, maybe it was actually just there were skills that suited that, writing skills.
Because I'm actually thinking being a lawyer in some ways is not dissimilar. Like there's still advocating, there's still a desire for truth-telling and all those kind of things as well too. So it's probably not as much of a stretch as some people might think it is.
And potentially, you know, the creative interests I had at the time, being into music and
Still into music, aren't you?
Still into music, in a band, yeah.
Yeah, what's the band?
Dog is the name.
Nice.
Yeah.
On Spotify?
That's a different story. Let's come back to that later. But there's a song on there. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Might include that link in the show notes, Kira. I think just for everyone. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. We'll come back to that. So, So interest at the time led to that journalism bent a little bit more and sort of
Well, that's what I could get into right in Melbourne.
Yep.
So I'm like, let's do it. Moved into Glen College at La Trobe Uni on campus, and had a ball of a time. Finished my journalism degree, and I remember this thing that the uni put on at the end of it, where in year 3, where they're like, "Hey, come to these sessions, and you can figure out how to get a job." And I'm like, "Okay, a job." I haven't had one of those except for like KFC and the petrol station in Denny, right?
Yeah.
So, and they were basically like at the time in the early 2000s, the jobs you could get were go back to a country town and do a cadetship, like at the Addy or something.
Yep.
Or you could sell advertising for a network TV. I was like, well, I'm probably not really up for that, and I'm having a great time partying at uni. So maybe I'll just keep studying. That's the ticket.
Yeah.
To not being responsible.
Yeah.
So I applied for law, got into law.
Nice.
So that was another 4 years of study and kind of hit the ground running.
So 7 years of study.
Yeah. Plus you do this thing at the end of your law degree where it's like an extra 6 months.
Okay.
To do the practical
almost like on the job training.
Yeah, they used to call it articled clerkship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah, traineeship.
So quite a different journey. It wasn't you woke up and said, I'm going to be a lawyer. It was sort of you fell into the field. What drew you to law as opposed to economics or any other areas? Was there something that sort of called you that direction to sort of say?
Well, I'm a rule follower.
Yes.
At heart, even though I say I'm a rebel, right? So maybe it was that, or I mean, like I said off the top, like it's about wanting to help people, but my skills kind of fell. And my interest was in law. Yep. And a lot of people, it's like upholding human rights and things like that.
Yep. Which some of your first job was that as well too, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, great. So you go through, do your law degree, then jump straight into being a lawyer?
Did I do that? I worked at a food and wine deli, and that was during my law degree.
Yep.
Discovered the fine foods of life, right? Because, you know...
Probably not available in Denny.
Meat and 3 veg. Yeah. There was a Macca's.
Yeah, nice.
Fish and chips. All the great stuff that you come back to, right?
Yep.
But this was like learning how to this was prosciutto, preserves, cheeses, all the good stuff.
Import.
Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful. I didn't like olives. What was wrong with me? So learn about the finer part of life there. So I worked there, but then I thought, oh, well, I'm going to have to try and find a job as a lawyer. And at the time, there were, and there probably still are, there's just way too many law grads for jobs. Mm-hmm. So a way to get in was to go and work at community legal centres.
Okay.
Which are publicly funded. So it's a bit like legal aid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except it's not means tested in the sense of it's about each community centre gets a certain amount of money to help the community.
Yep.
And they can then run that however they please to the extent their funders allow that. A lot of it's based on disadvantage and vulnerability criteria.
Yep.
As opposed to, I just can't afford a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And so then you essentially cut your teeth advocating for those disadvantaged in society, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I started on the front desk at Whittlesea Community Legal Centre. And then Well, then I volunteered at Consumer Action Law Centre, which is where I then became a legal assistant. So basically, the new clients would come in and they'd give me the sheet with the names, and I'd type it into the computer and print out the file and be like, to the lawyer, here you go, here's the file, and can I hear a bit about this and help you with it at all? Trying to cut your teeth a bit more. So so did that, and then opportunity comes up and you grab it as a junior lawyer role. So
excellent.
Yep.
How have you felt? Because a lot of things will have shifted over that time. There's a lot of stuff going electronically.
Yep.
What was it like back then? I mean, we had Pip on recently talking about her role at Bendigo Bank was crossing out TFNs or cutting them out and things like that. So you probably have seen a shift in technology over that time, have you?
Well, everything's electronic, right?
Yeah.
And I've got 2 young kids, a 5 and an 8-year-old, and my 5-year-old said the other day, we're trying to, say you can't go and watch your iPad or your screen, and she was like, but Dad sits at the computer all day. So I don't know the answer. Can you get the answer for that one?
I don't, because I do as well, and it's almost I find it frustrating. It's like,
one of the things about a good lawyer is anticipating what the other side's going to say and countering that, right?
Yes.
But I didn't do that with my 5-year-old. So
how have you found that with kids? Because I find they come out with the most interesting pearls, and you're like, I actually don't know what to do with that.
A little bit, but my wife is absolutely a better parent than me, so she's got it covered. But going back to your question, so how's it changed? Like we've moved from paper to electronic. There was back in the day, I was doing a lot of court work, so there was lots of paper things you had to go to court with, hand up to judges or to clients or other parties.
Yep.
Now that's all on computer. There's so much more what we call the efficiency, right?
Yes.
But we didn't think about that back then. We were just busy doing our job, and I think that's where, for a lot of professional services firms we've gone, we think about systems, processes and efficiencies now to get the most out of our people and their well-being.
Yep. Yeah. And I think too, efficiency, as you mentioned, is that well-being piece as much as anything else. Does somebody actually want to do this job? No. Then how do we not have it as part of what happens and actually give them more headspace to do the other things they need to do? I remember very early days scanning documents when I was at Stratagem, and that was definitely not an exciting job, and usually something you leave for a Friday afternoon when you don't need a whole lot of headspace anyway.
Yeah. But part of the other thing is, AI's infiltrating the legal industry a bit.
Yes.
And I think the big challenge we have with where the technology's up to now is, let's say, Kris, for example, you decide, I'm jack of being an accountant, it sucks. I want to be a lawyer because they're way better, right? So you come to me and you say, I want to be, your graduate lawyer. Great.
Yep.
So instead of having you there, I could use AI to do all the things, all the research, all the tasks that person would do. So how do we bring people up? And that's the challenge we have in probably in many industries, but certainly in law.
And I think
we need to find an answer to.
And I think too, on that AI point, when AI spits out the correct answer and when it doesn't. Yeah. But that's because you've gone. Yeah. You've done your time in the trenches. You've reviewed countless documents. You've reviewed countless wordings. You know what to look for. Someone new who comes in and relies on AI to give the response, well, for them, they don't know what should be there. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, how do you teach that side without actually going to the trenches, without actually doing what needs to be done to make it second nature?
Exactly. And I think ethically for us, and in terms of our own values, it's, don't we just want to employ local people and give them a job instead of doing AI? So there's the tension there, right? Yep. Is you want to help people in your community and give them a job and build them up and build up Bendigo, right?
And I think too, we still need people in the industry. AI is never going to replace everything, and people still want to deal with people, but it is going to be an interesting challenge going forward. I was listening to, I was watching a video the other week on they were testing memory to see what was memory and what was known, and so they gave a chessboard and asked someone who'd never played chess. They had 5 seconds to look at it and then recreate it. Yeah. And then they did the same with the Grand Chess Master, and the Grand Chess Master could nearly put, I think it was like 70% of the board in the places it needed to be.
Right.
And then they gave a second scenario where all the pieces weren't where they normally would be if you're playing a game.
Mm-hmm.
And the Grand Chess Masters were nearly exactly the same as someone who hadn't looked at it. And it was because they had learned all of where positions would be in a game that they could remember, this looks similar to these ones, I can recreate that and get most of it right. Yeah. And I think that's the same that we're going to have with people with technology.
Critical analysis skills.
The rote learn of reading 1,000 leases it gives you that
experience.
That experience that you just can't replicate by pushing technology to give you the response. You can use it to help, but it shouldn't be there as the... So anyway...
the other part of it is just the comfort of a human being who understands you, has life experience, and can say, well, I've done this for 15, 20, 30 years. This is what I think you should do.
And I think that life experience also helps see around the corners, because if you feed AI your problem, while it doesn't take into account all the other issues that might be sitting around that problem, but you as a person who understands your client knows that there is more than that problem at hand.
Well, and that's one of the big things that I do as a lawyer. It's, I see myself as more the practical problem solver.
Yes.
And someone will come to me and say, this is what I want. And the first thing you've really got to do is understand what the objective is. Is it what they're saying?
Yes.
Or is it actually this or that, right? And often it comes back to, I want to not have to deal with this, and you deal with it, and my business gets on with success and growth, right? So that's what I look at. I'm like thinking back to that, because that's mostly what people's objectives are.
Yes. Yeah. And they want to focus on the things that they're good at, and then give you the problems that you're good at.
Yeah.
Solve for them. No, that's really good. So if we go back to the journey, because we're not at the end yet, or not at the end at all, but
that tangent.
I'm so sorry.
We could be more than an hour.
Yeah, that's it. For those listening, we apologise. Just come for the ride. So then from there, legal aid, Whittlesea is where we last left off. Where to from there?
So then I went to Consumer Action Law Centre.
Yep.
Yeah, legal assistant, doing kind of support work. Mm-hmm. And, gradually got thrown a few files, totally out of my depth. And then, a role for a lawyer came up, so I applied for that and got that, and I was really grateful for that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I did that for probably 2 years.
Yes.
And then Penny, my wife, who had been she didn't do the extra 4 years of uni, right? Pen was like, well, I want to go overseas and do something, right? I want to have a year off. And actually what she wanted to do was go to Whistler or to Canada and do adaptive sports, right?
Yep.
So if you don't know what adaptive sports is, it's basically helping people who can't do a sport to do it, right? As simple as that, right? So a good example was somebody who lives in a wheelchair hiking them to the top of a mountain. And I'm like, how the heck do you do that? And she's like, well, we just find a way, So
that's awesome.
So basically we went and did that, and I had a year break from being a lawyer.
Yep.
So what did I do? I scanned tickets. I stacked shelves in the supermarket. I sold tickets on the Peak to Peak at Whistler.
Awesome. Great experience, though.
Also, and I also worked as a journalist for the first time ever. So, yeah.
Did that cement that you'd made the right call to be a lawyer, or?
I didn't mind it.
Yep.
But my, what you call the radar, like most professions, you've got to have your radar to know your right and wrong and figure things out. That just wasn't there.
Yes.
And that was probably 6 months worse, and I grew up pretty quickly. But thinking about, all right, well, here's the story, but the editor's like, but what's your angle? Well, you're going to make it interesting, right? Go and write the boring story.
Yes.
So developing that was a really interesting intellectual part of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where I think now people come with an angle and then find a story to fill the angle rather than
possibly, or just
Anyway, it's a topic for another time. We won't get into that.
Podcast,
Yeah. So year off in Canada.
Yeah.
You didn't think this is it? We're going to put down stumps here and just
maybe. Yeah. But
because it's a beautiful part of the world.
Well, yeah, and
cold, but beautiful.
We lived in. It was to go to the snow, right? So we lived in the ski hills, and my boss who ran the paper, and there was 4 of us. If there was ever a powder day, snow overnight, and he was like, "Don't come in till 10 o'clock. Go and enjoy it. Get the first lift." So
I love it.
So that was really cool. But it wasn't fun walking to work over 1.5 km in -29. Yeah.
So you can really say to your kids, I walked through the snow to work, don't complain.
Yeah, no, my kids, they'll be like, whatever, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Quite an experience.
Well, it was fun. You know, and it was about kind of rediscovering that, but also discovering, well, I'm not sure that was what I wanted to do, stack shelves and scan tickets.
Yep.
And that wasn't for me. And there's still a lot of people I know over there who are still doing that and having a great time, right?
Yeah.
And then there are times now as a business owner and where I think maybe I should have stuck with it.
I could just be stacking shelves and skiing on the slopes. And,
Yeah.
Yep.
But so anyway, I got this email back in the day when you emailed your friends. Remember that?
When
you sent
what?
your mates emails.
Yes. Yeah. And it was exciting to get one.
And you wrote on Facebook what's happening.
Yep.
Right? So this was then.
But now you get an email. Like it's just
it's all
one
just,
of 100. Yeah.
It's just junk in the inbox. But
yes.
It was a former colleague was like, such and such has left. Would you come back? So I reached out and got that same job I had back.
Yep.
Yeah. So I came back. Yeah.
Did Penny come with you, or did
she stayed for a bit?
Okay.
But no, I came back, and the plan was then to come back, and I don't know. We didn't really have a long-term plan until about probably 5 or 6 years later.
Yep.
When you grow up and you follow that journey of living in Melbourne, where you gradually move out into the suburbs, and that just wasn't for us, right?
Yep.
Yeah, because it wasn't what we knew, and our passions weren't there, and we had kids and couldn't do the things like go out on a Monday night to a gig and have a pub meal, that kind of thing. That just wasn't as achievable anymore. So
things do change when the kids come along, don't they?
Yeah. So basically, I was like, well, let's move somewhere in regional Victoria between where our two families are.
Yep.
So Bendigo is one of those locations. My sister's here, friends here, and I reached out to my friend Alex, who runs Pogo Espresso. I said, hey, do you know any lawyers in town? He said, yeah, I know there's 2 people. One of them I reached out to didn't respond. The other one was Marika McMahon, who's now my business partner, and realised everyone knows Marika. So, before this, doing this pod with you, I look back at those emails just to think back and reflect. And it's been 6 years, and caught up with Marika. Came down here for a 2-hour interview with Russell Robertson.
Yep.
And, he was, come down and we'll have a chat. So we go into the boardroom and then, we just get talking, right? Yeah. Like a house on fire.
Just like this.
Yeah. And then he's like, all right, well, I better go now. And I look at my watch and I'm like, it's 5 o'clock. I'm going to get back to Melbourne. So, landed on my feet there. And
excellent.
Yeah, the rest is history, I suppose.
So what year was that?
2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good time to move, just before lockdowns and everything like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, we should have just bought a place and moved down. But actually, the coincidence with that was the previous job I had. I was working with a woman, Diane. Yep. And I said, we're moving to Bendigo. She said, my nephew lives there. And I said, oh, yeah, cool, we're moving on this street. And she's like, I don't know where it is. I'm like, I'll show you. It could be his house, and it was. So that was a nice little nice connection to me.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. And so obviously you didn't come in as a director.
No.
You came in and you've cut your teeth for a few years and gone from there. So
that's right.
How have you found the transition to Bendigo, to the regional side of things? Business is still business at the end of the day.
Yeah. Great. I mean, Bendigo's such a wonderful cosmopolitan city, right? You've got what you need. You've got the arts, you've got sport, you've got everything, right? And if you need to duck down to Melbourne for a day or whatever, you can do that.
And it's not that far. Like I was talking to a client yesterday, and I said the trip down is probably similar to some people's commutes just to get into the city. So it's not actually that far. At the end of the day, it's just more of a direct run down and away you go. So, so let's talk a bit about now as a commercial lawyer.
Yes.
How are you helping clients? Because I think everyone, and we probably touched on a little bit of that in your day to day, which I loved, because I think some people go, what do people do day to day? Do they just sit at a computer and bash away? It's like, no.
According to my children, yes.
There is an element of that. I actually heard someone say, one of the kids used to say, they just shuffle papers. That's their job. And in some ways, there is some some truth to that, which sort of hurts a little bit. But there is a whole lot of other things that go around shuffling that paper.
Yeah.
So how are some of the ways that you help clients? And I know we've caught up and talked a little bit about that business journey for clients and sort of the business journey they go on. So I'd love to hear a bit about that journey that you see for clients, and then sort of how we help at each stage along the way.
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of the work I will do will be with people when they're starting a business.
Yep.
So a lot of that's actually getting the structure right, often primarily with accountants.
Yep.
Figuring that out, making sure it's set up correctly.
Yes.
Your business structure, we call it, whether that's a company or a trust.
Yep.
And then a bit of what I call the insurance work, which is ownership agreements between partners to set out, well, what are our expectations here? Who's going to do what? And what happens if it doesn't work out? Because
I think some of that at the start is undervalued, because I think sometimes people are jumping into a new business.
Yeah.
They're excited about getting going. We'll sort out the details later. Let's just go. But the details are actually quite important at the start, because if you don't get it right, I think that's where issues can come down the track, because it's, well, here's what we agreed to do, and at some point something will go off the rails. Sometimes it won't, and that's great, and then other times it will go disastrously so, I imagine.
Yeah, there's a decent chunk of my work which is helping people navigate exits from business.
Yes.
Business breakups.
Exits are a lot easier if the entry's smooth, though, isn't it?
Yeah, they can be. I mean, if you don't have something that sets out how the exit's going to work, an agreement, then it can be really painful.
Yeah,
you know, you have a person leaving thinking their value of the business is worth a fortune, and the people staying saying, well, no, it's not actually, and you didn't do all of this and that. We want to pay you out over 10 years and et cetera. So
what are some of the things you see people need to consider when they're setting up the structure? Let's start with the structure, and then we can talk about the agreements as well too.
Yeah. Well, what do you want to achieve? Do you know what I mean? And where does the risk lie, right? So you might have people on their own or in a relationship, and you've got to think about, well, do we need to set up a company? Could you be a sole trader? Do we need to set up two companies where all of your business ideas are kept in one, and then all the risky activity you do sits over in the other one? Is that overkill? You know? Do we need to set up a trust, which you might actually just use to, for tax effectiveness?
Yes.
To put it that way.
Yeah.
So you can distribute income to individuals.
Yep.
Yeah. So things like that, and then also...
so really understanding, and for people to have a vision of where they want to take the business, because I think that's exactly, because if you want to be big, it's a lot easier to get that right at the start than to try and deal with that down the track.
Exactly.
But you don't want compliance and legal overkill if you're just like, this is just going to be me doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And the risk
necessary?
is low.
Yep.
No, that's really good. And on terms of the agreement side, I assume that's more when there's more than one person involved. I assume I wouldn't have to write an agreement with myself, but if...
I've heard people marry themselves these days.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm not a family lawyer, so I don't know if it's legal, but no, the answer is no, Kris.
Yeah, okay, excellent. So, but if people are going in together, and I think that's where you start facing problems, isn't it? Because one side has different expectations to the other, or one side might...
As they say, two's company, three's a crowd, right? So two, if you and I, if we're going to set up something, we're generally going to agree on things before they happen, right?
Excellent.
We probably just want a mechanism for if something happens unexpected, how we would buy you out or pay you out or whatever, right? That's what the agreement will do. So you pass away unexpectedly, you've got insurance to make sure that I can buy you out and your family, your estate's looked after. Right.
And I think that's one of the things people don't always think about is what are those other events? It's not only an exit from we've had a dust up and we're no longer friends or business partners, we're just doing our own thing. What are all those other events? The car crash, that unexpected turn, the heart attack or the stroke or something like that all of a sudden means I can't be in the business. and you're sitting there left holding the bag going, well, now I've got to pay out your part plus try and run it, and vice versa. And it's that cross insurance is part of it, but there's also agreements that go around that, isn't it? So it's not just having the insurance, it's making sure the understanding of why is that.
The agreement's part of your insurance cover because it sets out your process, right?
Yes.
And you can always agree outside of that to something different, but you've got it to fall back on.
Yes.
Because if you don't have it to fall back on, you've got nothing.
Yes.
Right?
And that's when things
you can't force someone to agree to something, is what I say to people.
Yep.
Sometimes you've got leverage, sometimes you don't, right?
Yes.
So that's probably the first part of the business owner journey.
Yep.
The next part is, all right, well, you're going and you're set up. What do we need to actually help you now to set you up for success as you keep going? So, for example, is it I've had a problem and I've discovered I actually need a privacy policy or I need a drug and alcohol policy in my workplace?
Yep.
Sometimes it's more proactive, like you come to me, Kris, and you say, hey, I sell coffee cups, I manufacture them. I actually just need an agreement that I give to my customers, my suppliers, that sets out what my expectations are around payment terms and protects me if they go bust and don't pay me, things like that.
And that can be hard if you don't have that agreement and you've got someone that owes you a lot of money to try and claw it back, isn't it?
You're cooked.
Yep. Exactly.
To use the legal term.
But I think sometimes those finer details are missed in the midst, like business is busy and there's a lot of other things going on, and sometimes people don't always remember to do the paperwork or to do those things or just take that 5 minutes of call it due diligence or whatever you want to call it, say if we're engaging this person and they're going to owe you money, make sure you've got something in place. Otherwise, there's no way to claw that back, which is where you can run into problems. And then I would assume, not that we don't want to give you work, but it creates a lot more work for you writing letters and doing things that could have been sort of avoided if...
Exactly. A lot of that stuff isn't actually helping you with success. It's distracting you from spending time on building your business and growth, right?
And I love that because distraction is one of the biggest killers of it. And we've got phone, whatever, there's too many distractions already, family. Not that they're all bad distractions, but just in terms of the time you actually have to do really good business work is diminished more and more.
And my philosophy with people, so say someone comes to me and says, I'm owed 20 grand by these people. I've dealt with them for many years. They're generally pretty good payers, but now they're kind of giving me the runaround. So I'd be saying, a lawyer would say, here's your options. I'll write them a letter of demand. That'll cost you X. Then we go to the magistrate's court and we'll get your money back plus some of my costs.
Messy.
Well, my approach is okay, well, what's the cost benefit of this? Okay. And think about your time as a business owner in terms of productivity loss. What's your hourly rate? Okay, so all this time I'm going to spend, you're going to spend that too, right?
Yes.
And you're going to potentially lose opportunities and the ability, let alone the stress and the positivity you get with running your business. You're going to be pulled back a bit. So is there a cost benefit in that? Not that I don't want to run your magistrate's court case, but we need to think about the ultimate objective, right?
But I think too, that's sometimes what people don't always think about is that opportunity cost. If I get the ducks in a row right at the start, or I do a little bit extra at the start, it could save me a heck of a lot of heartache down the track where I'm actually not working to grow the business. I'm actually working just to protect what I've already done or bring that money in that I should have just happened a lot easier. So.
And hindsight's wonderful, and I think if you do find yourself in that situation where something's gone wrong, you don't miss the opportunity to think, how could I have done it better in the first place? And can I do that now?
Yes.
Right? So, all right, well, actually, I need these terms with payers my customers going forward because I've had this one problem. Right?
So I love that it's not just at the start, but as they're growing, it's how do we put the measures in place so that we don't have a roadblock or a barrier in the future, and we can continue to grow exponentially. What problems do you see or that you're helping clients with when they're scaling? Like as they start to get bigger, you start out small, then you start adding staff, then it starts, the job that you were doing when you first started looks nothing like the job you're doing now, and it feels like you're running around in circles. What are some of the things that you're coming in and helping in those instances with?
That's probably more about your people and their well-being and putting infrastructure around that. So you might have business owners that are growing and still trying to do their core work, but also manage their business and their people at the same time. So that's where you're probably having employment-related issues, which might be something happens at the Christmas party. I've got two people who don't get along. I've got performance issues with this staff member. What on earth do I do? Some people have to say to them, it's not the 80s anymore. You can't just sack them.
Yes.
Doesn't work like that anymore.
Yep.
Unfortunately for some.
Yes.
Yeah. That's probably the big thing as we see this scale up.
Is the people problems.
Yeah, because you're only as good as your people, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so you're there. If I look at it from your support, you're coming in and saying, well, what measures can we put in place? What agreements do we need to make sure we've got there for staff, and things like that?
Yeah, a bit of it's actually reactive. Some of it could be governance work around, all right, well, we're going to go to the next, for the next 5 years, our strategic plan is to build from 10 staff to 50. What do we need to do? Okay, let's look at governance. We'll look at culture as well.
Yep.
I can give you advice on that because governance and strategy and culture are one of my interests. It's probably not strictly a legal thing.
Yes.
But we would look at it that way.
But it probably does help maybe avoid some legal issues down the track. And I think sometimes people discount culture when culture can actually be the difference between having a team that runs without drama and a team that has constant drama and issues going on.
Exactly.
So, no, that's really good. And then obviously businesses can go through a life cycle, but also the business owners can go through a life cycle. So sometimes you can have a business that's growing and at some point the business owner says, you know what, I'm done, or I'd like to retire, I'd like to exit. And there's probably a few different off-ramps for a business owner, isn't there? Some of it is we just close everything up.
Yep.
Another one might be I want a succession plan to a child or to an employee, or another one might be I'm selling, I'm getting out. So and that's where you probably come in and do a lot of work around that side as well.
Yeah, the business succession fascinates me, particularly where.
Why is that?
It's not commercial. It's deep-seated emotion for people. And it's
a little bit like the family home, isn't it? Like you can say all day, this makes the best financial decision or this makes the best whatever, but there's still a sentimental connection to it, isn't it?
And I really love doing that work because you're helping people through that side of things. But you do have to take a commercial and emotional lens to it.
Yes.
Because you have people who have particular views about what's fair and you're not often taking a commercial approach to, well, Kris, you're selling your business to me based on the market valuation of $5 million. It's, well, Kris, you've been a great son of mine. So I'm going to give you my business if you just take on my $1 million overdraft, for example. Yeah. And then Kris has a brother or sister?
I've actually got one brother and two sisters. So
And how do you look after them?
Yes. Okay.
And then there's all sorts of...
And they're probably all sitting crossed arm on the side going, well where's our...
Why are you looking after him?
Where's our shit? Yeah, this was our inheritance. What are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you get into the arguing over who got more lunch money in grade 8. And you've got to bring people back to what's your objective.
We're not in grade 8 anymore, so we don't yet.
What's your objective? And I'm here for you, but we need to think about what the ultimate objective is.
Yep. Do you what do you see works best when people are exiting? Is it succession? Is it selling? Do you see many that just close the doors and say this is all too hard?
Depends what you want. Like you don't often have people closing the doors. People will hand over a business.
Yep.
On pretty favourable terms to whoever's taking it on.
Yep.
Which carries risk for them, but a lot of people actually just want their business in good hands, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, they've spent years working on it, and they just want to see that it gets looked after.
Yeah, and the business,
it's a bit like having that classic car and just wanting to make sure whoever's got it next just looks after it and doesn't just go and put it into a wall or something like that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky when you have people who know each other well and sell their business, so you've got this commercial lens to it, but there's a level of personal familiarity between them. And so my job to add value is to say, well, look, here's how I'd be advising you if you didn't know this person. Let's say it's Bunnings is buying your business.
Removing the emotion from it.
Yeah, the objectivity. And look, I understand you don't want to do that. That's as long as you know and you've weighed up that risk, and we've talked about it's a low risk, it's a high risk, it's moderate, it's extreme, it's whatever.
In terms of handing over businesses, do many people plan ahead, or do you think they just sort of they just reach a day where they go, I need to get out?
Probably, yeah. There's an event or a timing, or some people do.
Yep. What in terms contrasting those two, planning ahead, and I'm more talking for our listeners who might be out there thinking about, well, I'm not ready to sell right now, but do I need to start getting ready? It's a bit like planning for retirement.
Yeah.
You can either do it when you retire, or you can sort of start putting some things in place and probably feel a lot better about the day that you do retire.
Yeah.
Do you see a contrast between the reactive, I've got to sell, to I want to get ready and do this well?
I think most people that come to me outside the family-based business succession will have prepared themselves relatively well.
Okay.
Rather than getting to the end and getting to the drop-dead date and being like, this place is a mess.
Yes.
Most people will have a time, and they will have their advisors, their trusted advisors, whether it's me or an accountant like you or a financial advisor, whatever, or their business coach, and they will have gotten their business to a point where there's the best place it can possibly be, right? And they will have had their advice around, well, once I get paid a certain amount of money for my business, what's going to happen to that? You know, am I going to have to get concessions on capital gains tax, for example?
Yep.
What do I do with transferring and selling properties and things like that?
All those other pieces around it as well too.
It can be a 5 or 10 year run-up for some people to start those conversations.
Yep. Yeah. And there can be a handover of staff to whoever's buying as well, and those kind of things too, isn't there? And so there's all of how that looks. And
identifying those potential successors and putting in place, you know, the infrastructure they might need.
Yeah, a lot to navigate at the end of the day. What is one thing that you see people do poorly when they're thinking about selling or succession planning, or just haven't put on their radar that they probably should?
They probably just come in to me and say, I'm selling my business, but I haven't really done anything. It's just I've reached that date where I'm ready to sell, but there's been no preparation. And they haven't considered some of the big issues. Like, for example, let's say you have a retail shop and there's 500 grand worth of stock, right? And we're working through a contract to say, well, they're going to buy all the stock, and we put an offer to the other side with the contract, and they say, well, we don't want half of this stock. It's all old and obsolete. There's open containers. And you think, right, well, there's 250 grand shaved off our price. So the preparation's really important for that.
So thinking about what you're actually going to be selling and how that looks, and
what its marketable value is,
and how to make it attractive to whoever the buyer might be. Let's talk, and I've loved what we've talked about so far. Have you got some examples of how you've helped clients through some of these steps in the journey? And obviously we're not here to divulge names and things like that. So But I'd love to hear some of the examples, or just some of the learnings that real life examples. Because I think everyone sort of hears those and goes, I really resonate with that. So yes, confidentiality is important. So keep it generally. But I did find this actually, and it made me think of an example. I was wondering about this book. What's this book?
It was actually in the cupboard, and I was looking for a mouse pad, and there it was. But
The Horse and the Law.
Yeah. I don't profess to be a horse law specialist.
Right. So this is all just about horse law?
Allegedly.
I didn't know there was a whole thing just for horses.
And so what happened this is one example, right? So this is an example of two people who decided to buy...
It's got a something ripped off. Looks like a very old calendar with 1980 written on it.
Wow.
That is
okay.
That is.
Someone might be coming back to get that. You better leave it.
Yeah, I will leave that in there. I'm very intrigued now.
Well, going through the journey of businesses and some problems they can have is two people decide on a relatively friendly basis to buy something together. In this case, it was a horse.
Mm.
And, breed horses for sale, right? No consideration of around how that might actually work. We were just handshake agreement, right? It fell out because one person decided to do something different, was potentially siphoning off assets that were part of what we might just call the partnership.
Mm.
And then, you come in and you try and help them kind of draw a line in the sand and say, well, give me what I'm entitled to.
Yes.
And how you value that, right?
Mm.
So that's a good example. So, breeding 5 horses, how do you value that? And what about future loss of profits?
And this is one of the things that not everyone understands is there's not just a easy way to value a business. You can't just go, well, we made this, so it's worth this. So, well, there's quite a few other bits and pieces at play within that.
Yeah.
So
my experience is you'll get 5 business valuations and they'll all be different. They might use different formulas. They might add in and exclude certain things like the wages the owners take or the depreciation of machinery in a particular year.
Yep.
So there's certainly very different ways that it can be spun. But that's a good example of where, if you'd set things up right at the start and you took a bit more of a commercial approach, I mean, you don't have to, it was friendly, right?
Yeah.
And that's all good. But if you figured out at the start, right, we need an agreement on how this is going to end and what's going to happen.
Yes.
That's a good example of that one, and we wouldn't have ended up in court and having a fight with someone.
So this is a real thriller for lawyers. Probably not.
It's dynamic, right? It's a similar formula, but it's also the subject matter's interesting.
If it's available on Amazon, we might put it might put a link in the show notes. But it might be
maybe the copyrights run out, and I can I could write it myself.
We'll have to find a good
the
lawyer
70
to
years,
sort that out with. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. But I think that's one of the things is some of these issues aren't like people think they're new issues or now problems, but they've been around for probably generations in terms of a lot of these things are dealing with disputes, and that's been a problem since. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So there's a lot of dispute work. Another example, actually, from my old job. I think we talked about this one was where I helped a young Iraqi man who'd come to Australia and couldn't speak much English at all.
Yep.
And he bought a used car from a car lot in Melbourne.
Yep.
It was a lemon. So we wrote to the car dealer and said, hey, give us a refund, right? There are these legal guarantees under a law, which basically you get what you pay for, right?
Yes.
Outside the statutory warranty, which is what, the dealer says, no warranty, rah, rah, rah.
Yep.
Okay, all right, we're off to VCAT. So the tribunal, it can make a decision. The car dealer self-represents, that's fine. We get to the hearing. He's sitting across from the table, from me on the table like this, and just being very lovely. I'm thinking, no, you're not. You're not a lovely person. You'd give this person a refund if you were. Anyhow, so we get about halfway through the first day, and we've got our expert car mechanic there saying, well, this was an absolute lemon.
Yep.
And then we're making our submissions why, based on that evidence that it's a lemon, the law should give us a refund, right? So we finish our side of the story, our case. I rest my case. Not quite. And the car dealer gets up and he says, well, I disagree for all of this, and wittering on for a couple of hours. And then by the end of the day, about 4:30, and court normally finishes at about 4:30.
Yep.
So we'd already kind of gone over time. And he's like, but that guy over there, the lawyer who was sitting next to me, because there was 2 of us, well, he agreed with me to resolve this case. So we had a problem because we didn't agree to that. So lawyers can't be witnesses for their own clients. You have to be independent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have,
so a real curveball that was not correct, but needed to then be proved one way or the other, which I think that's people discount that sometimes, don't they, in disputes, is that people are going to be honest and people are just going to be straightforward and, no, he's a good mate, it'll be fine, where when the chips are down, you don't know what people are going to say or what people are going to do.
So we had to say to the judge, they're called a member in VCAT, I think we need to stand adjourned for the day and come back tomorrow. So we go back to the office and figure out, well, can we still act for this person, this young person who probably didn't quite grasp what had gone on during the day, respectfully, and couldn't speak much English. And so there was a second day of the hearing the next day, right? Can we show up ethically? We can't be a witness and advocate for him.
Yeah.
Right? So what are we going to do? And in the end, we'd made the call that we'd sub out.
Just for all those listeners, lawyers do have ethical dilemmas.
Very humorous.
Yep.
Yeah. Confidentiality is a big one. But this was more like, okay, well, can you work within the ethical rules for the administration of justice, to get the right outcome? So we had that lawyer step aside. Another lawyer jumped in with me. That lawyer, Michael was his name, Michael Hermitage, hope you're listening, retired lawyer, great influence on my career.
Yep.
Michael hops in the witness box, and so he has to go in there and explain, well, no, there was no agreement. And in the end we won because the used car dealer wasn't very credible. Would you believe that?
I would actually. Not that all used car dealers are bad,
that's
but
right. I've got clients who are used car dealers. They're good people.
From my
Bad
dealings with people is trust your intuition. If something seems a bit suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a really, there is. The best way to be a commercial lawyer, understand what your client's objectives are, but also know that the work you're going to do, like the documents I draft for people, are going to be marked by a judge. There's nothing quite like having a judge sitting there looking at you, judging you in the same room. Yeah.
No, that's good. Very good. Do you have any last take-home messages for people who might be thinking about growing their business and thinking, what do I need to come and see Lockie? Is there something I'm missing? What do you think? Because I think that's the big one for people is succession makes sense. I want to get out. But for those people who are in the midst of the busyness of business, you can have the blinders on. You run it down the road. Weeks roll into months, roll into years, and all of a sudden you're going, that thing I should have done. I'll use my example. My wife and I have been married for many years, and we hadn't done a will yet, and we're like the kids started coming along, and we're going, probably need to do this, and it still took a bit of time to actually get around to doing it, and it was like, if we hadn't have done that, then there's a whole raft of issues that could have popped up otherwise. So, is there things for people, any last take-home messages for those people who are in the midst of business, who are busy, who are probably listening to this while they're doing 3 other things? What are some of those things that you see they miss or that they should be looking out for?
I think it's a bit more simple than that. So if you're looking to start or grow your business, you need to go to your trusted advisors, right?
Yes.
And you don't know what you don't know when you don't know about something.
Yes.
So you go to your professional advisor who has expertise, and they can spot issues for you, right?
Yes.
And my advice might be, I think you should do this. At least you know about it, and you can make a valued judgment call on whether that's the right thing to do for you. And you just don't know about something that you've totally missed 15 years later.
So the big question is, what am I missing?
Yep.
Is there anything I need to be aware of?
Yep.
Love it. And I think that's the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And that's where we come in to provide that different lens and perspective. And that's excellent.
But ultimately, you might do a 12-month business plan, but where do you want to be in 5, 10, 15 years? What's your strategy to get there? Can we add value to that along the way? I'm not going to upsell you to do things that are a waste of your time and mine. I don't want to do that. No. What's the point?
And I think that's one of the things we talk about with clients regularly is that we're not here to make things complicated, but if we see an opportunity, we want to put it in front of you because it may be the last time we can do it, or it may not make as much sense 2 or 3 years down the track, or it may even be more pertinent that in 2 or 3 years down the track when there's a problem and you go, why didn't you do that? Well, we did talk about it. So,
and I say to clients when I meet with them for the first time, stop me if I'm talking legal mumbo jumbo. And if you've got a question, just interrupt me, ask it. Don't wait.
Yep. Knowing is half the battle.
I don't want to talk like a lawyer. I want to talk like a human being.
Love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good last message there, Lockie. So thank you for that. Thank you for coming on today.
Pleasure.
Loved hearing the journey. Love that we've got some reading material for our listeners if they're
maybe I could
interested.
sign it and give it to you.
You know what? I'd love that because you haven't even written it. So
well, there's no finders keepers rule in the law, so
love it.
I've stolen it from someone.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Lockie, for coming on. Thank you for just giving a bit of insight into what a commercial lawyer does and how they add value to businesses. And I think for anyone out there who is thinking about starting, in the middle of growing, or thinking about selling, make sure you get the right people in the room having the right discussion. I think that's one of the biggest things. So thank you so much, Lachie. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Good on you, Kris. Thanks.
Thanks.